First things first, I know you're probably looking at the TV and the hat and thinking, he's gone full YouTuber. Next he's going to be telling us to smash that like button and sponsored by Audible. I will not be sponsored by Audible until they get some decent narrators. Yeah, I went there. So yeah, let's just pretend that I've gone full YouTuber, and it's not at all that after my last video in which I had to build a full film set in this room, I went to put it all back and just went, no, I'll put my last video there. You should watch it. It's really good. That video was way better received than I expected, and I really mean that. I genuinely thought that most people would be like, what the heck is this? I have no idea what's going on. So I basically just had this weird fantasy and I filmed it. Not like that. Despite that, the feedback was just so overwhelmingly positive, so thank you if you're one of those people. I actually had a really difficult time deciding which comment to pin because there were 4 comments from creators who were directly or indirectly involved with production. Joachim from Say It in Swedish was the voice of Swedish. Great thinking, 99. Nikhil, better known as Captain Sinbad, was the voice of English, but beyond that, seeing what he's done with his content in the last year or so has been of a massive inspiration to me, and I genuinely don't know how I would approach a video like my last one without his channel. Matt vs. Japan's comment was the one that I ended up pinning because he's such an influential voice in the language learning space, but also because what he said about my video was exactly what I was setting out to achieve, which was to make a creative video/film in this space. And the last comment that I thought about pinning was from someone who was less directly involved, a British guy named Jack Howard. Now the reason that his comment stood out was that Jack actually knows what he's doing when it comes to writing and directing stuff. He probably won't like me saying this, but he's a bona fide writer and director.
An actor and editor, stick an at the end of it and I'll give it a go.
He's got a proper body of work, collaborating with other people who also know what they're doing, and he actually gets paid to write and direct stuff, which when you're someone like me who has his 9-year-old operating the camera, and by camera I mean phone, that's a big deal. Jack's advice on small-time filmmaking and writing and directing and just the little things that I would need to do in order to make my idea into an actual thing has been some of the best I've ever heard. And his videos on these topics are some of the funniest I've ever seen. And just in case you're thinking, dude, if this Jack guy ever sees this, you're coming on a bit strong, it's gonna get weird. He already knows, I told him directly on Instagram. So it's already weird. Anyway, language learning. See, I have actually thought about this beforehand. Briefly. One of the most helpful pieces of advice came from Jack, and it's one of those things that you hear and think, that's so obvious. Why do more people not think of that? Boom. And it's something that doesn't just apply to filmmaking, it can apply to a lot of things, including language learning. Jack mentioned that when he directed this music video clip, he created a temporary version of it with just himself in place of the actor who would appear in the final version. It's called an animatic apparently. You can basically think of it as a placeholder for the final version. It doesn't have to look anything like the final version. It can be in low quality footage, it can be black and white, or even have the wrong person in the thing. It really just helps give you an idea of what shots you need, what movements need to be made, what needs to happen where, especially if you're setting it to something timed like an existing song. And me having never directed anything in my life, if you don't count these videos, which I don't, I saw that and knew that that's what I would need to do for my short film, because I already had Joachim and Nikhil's parts, so I needed to work out roughly what my part would even look like, because I had no idea yet. And for whatever reason, it would never have occurred to me to shoot anything other than the final version of the film, with the lights and the costume and the glasses and the sound and everything, which would then mean that the first time that I set out to film this, the first idea that I had of what everything would be like, would be the final version of the film, which hopefully when you hear it like that makes you realize how insane that is. But despite that, that's what some of us do with our target language. See, this is related, it all goes together. This can happen with grammar, comprehension, vocabulary. Most often it would happen with pronunciation. Whatever it is, people will not allow themselves to articulate, or people won't allow themselves to just listen to something they don't understand. They won't allow themselves to be bad at something before they move on to the next thing. They have to make it perfect, which is actually inefficient. Essentially, you can imagine it as people wanting their first draft to be print ready. And even if they're able to do that, the amount of the language that they're able to actually perfect all at once is so small that it's not really useful at all. Imagine a publisher telling a writer that instead of just writing a rough draft, they should write one print-ready sentence so that it can just go out to print, but it can only be one sentence because it takes that long to perfect. Look, I'm not advocating for just blurting out anything that comes to mind in any accent. Jag kan prata bra svenska. But placeholders that are acknowledged as being just that, placeholders, can be extremely useful. For example, the Swedish word for director, as in film director, I told you I'd thought about this, used to be so difficult for me that I would use like half my brain capacity for a whole conversation on just that word. Nowadays, regissör. Och det kan jag. That's a waste of time and energy. What I should have done was taken more advice from my mate Jack Howard. This is what he does when he comes across a Swedish word he can't say.
Breathtaking visuals, all set to Ludwig Göransson's fantastic pulsating score. Like, for example, Ludwig Göransson, who created the score for this.
Göransson? Not even Göransson, just most of the consonants, none of the vowels, but whatever, that'll do, near enough. For those playing at home, it's Ludwig Göransson, which, for a 3-syllable last name, has a ton of Swedish sounds in it. Basically, to say the name Göransson properly, you need to learn to speak Swedish, which from Jack's point of view is a complete waste of time. He doesn't need to learn to speak Swedish, he lives in the UK where everyone speaks English. Now this is slightly different from the placeholders that I'm encouraging you to use, because to reach a high level in your target language, it's very important that you have acknowledged placeholders. That is, placeholders that you know you're coming back to and you're going to correct one day. And the fewer of them that you can manage to have at a time, the better. Back in the day when I was in the Speak Early and Speak a Lot camp, so young and naive, I would stumble my way through hour-long conversations in which every sentence would have 3 or 4 pieces that I would wonder how you actually say. Obviously that's too many, and most people who do that won't be able to keep track of all the placeholders they put in, so some of those will become permanent fixtures in their language, others will just be removed entirely while they find a different way around saying whatever they need to say, but they'll do that every single time. These days I just look for a handful of things in each conversation that I'm either not sure about or feel off in some way. Specifics aside, I think those aiming for a high level in their target language often have this idea that they can never ever practice it wrong. It has to be right from the beginning, because if it's not, then we'll never be able to change it. And I know from experience that that's just not true. The difference is that a placeholder or an animatic version of a film or music video has to be acknowledged as being such. You wouldn't film the animatic version and then say, oh okay, I've done that now, it's filmed. You do it while you work out other things and where they go, and then when you're ready, you come to replace the draft version with the final version. That is to say, before your language is perfect, it's got to exist in some capacity, because as hard as making my short film was, and it was jävla svårt, so please go and watch it and comment on it, it still wasn't as hard as learning a foreign language. So if that's something you're doing, which since you're here I imagine it is, you need to learn to say, this'll do for now, I will sort out the details later. Which is exactly what I did for the end of this video, so something about subscribing, commenting...
You know, figure it out yourself.
Yep, what he said.